Hi everyone. So today we're joined by Silvia, and thank you for giving us some of your time. So today we'll just be giving a little overview of your experience with prison residencies. So we get stuck in. If we could just ask, can you tell us a little bit what your practice is about?
My practice is looking at movement, because I'm a dancer primarily, and how we inhabit spaces and what happens in our bodies, primarily without any technology. But also I am really interested in film, and I have been working with curating film or choreographing, the camera and the performer relationship, and I don't know, it changes slightly as it goes along, but primarily is movement based ideas around inhabiting spaces and how that impact how we move with others, and how we influence each other. So that's kind of a brief of it. Yeah. I find very difficult to kind of grasp sometimes, things, especially if I'm in process of specific work, because it really changes. But that's an overview of it.
Yes, and I think so your part with prison residencies, you bring something totally different from a dancer's perspective. Could you just tell us a little bit about how you developed your ideas for that? Because obviously it was quite an unusual space.
Yeah, I was really surprised because I planned something, right? And I planned something that was quite heavily technological, because I am doing some research on a new device. And as I arrived there and started walking, spent like 2 hours walking around, my kind of past in being a movement psychotherapist in a prison, it came back to me really strongly. So all the technology felt quite meaningless to the space. And I wasn't in a cell. I was in the place where there was a small kitchen and where they used to serve the food. So it was quite hard, because there was an emotional kind of impact of memory and an existence. I was never been jailed, but having worked in jail and working with mother and babies in the process of separation, because once the baby reaches 18 months at Holloway, they need to leave the prison. And I must be very honest, all of that experience I totally deleted, or thought I deleted from my memory. Even when I wrote the proposal, I didn't even connect those things. It was literally, when I was in the space. So I guess from there, it was very much to allow the responses, the combined responses of seeing the site as it is and the impact of that layered with my previous experience and memories of ideas on separation. So my approach was very visual to start with. I documented quite a lot of things. The main elements of the documentation were, the layers of the cells or the shapes, and that the shadows of those things. And also I was quite impressed by the tiny mirrors that were in the cells. That also became a strong reference for me in terms of reflection or reflecting times, So I think those elements kind of start to feed into what was evolving. I'm also never created objects, and it was really interesting that I finished with something that was like a nest type thing with some projections, and the projections were, I created like a score for me during the day. So I will have 10 minutes lying on the nest And I would have a specific image that I will look, or I will be aware that was there. And then I had that time, then I would come out of the nest, I would shift to the image and go back. And interestingly enough, it went back to photos of my family, me as a child, my parents who both passed away, and my mum died recently of COVID. So it kind of, it became this kind of very in-depth kind of movement inwards in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from your proposal to what the work actually produced, it was very emotive, your work that became led within the project. And obviously you had a very emotive job when you worked at Holloway. So, and it's really interesting that you didn't connect the dots when you done your proposal, because none of us knew before you arrived that your previous experience. So what was it like going back to a prison environment? Was that purely emotive, or did you sort of have assumptions of how you may feel or act in that space?
No, I didn't have any assumptions. I think I look for the freshness of embodying what emerges when I am in places or with people. And obviously I wrote a proposal, so I had a sense of something. But I really appreciate the freedom to actually drop it all. I had lots of other personal issues, so I couldn't attend as much as I wanted. I had frustrations along the way that I had to deal with,
Yeah.
but I felt that the whole thing was very accommodating of real stuff.
Yes.
And so I think that's what happened with the spaces. Like, it's not a studio, is it? It's not my studio at home. It is a place with an enormous amount of history, on the dust, in everything,
Yeah.
So if you take time to experience that space, that per se is work already, I think. So it was an amazing experience, and still having kind of reflections about it.
And do you think that you feel finished with this project, or is this something you could possibly keep working on in the future?
Interesting. I really want to continue, because I did something I've never done before, which was the creating of this object, this nest, with fabrics and materials. That I work with materials and props as a dance movement psychotherapist, and clients create things, but I normally don't use materials like that. And that obviously was influenced by the other artists, because they, there's a lot of object production in the residency with other artists, and it was quite scary to start with, because there was a sense of, oh, what is this? And I had pieces of cloth, everything was a little bit I didn't think it through. And at the end, things made sense. To me, at least, and I wished I had the chance to stay longer with it and create a way that people could inhabit, the nest and the structure for longer. So I think that's what I would like to go next, is to start from where I left. I'm starting to think of a place that I'd like to propose a residency, and go from there. So definitely, it really inspired me to carry on with where I got to.
Yeah, and it was really fascinating to see your process on how it developed, because it did drastically change. And I just want to pick up a little bit on your influences from other artists. How did you find it working within, up to 13 other women?
It was, the interesting thing was that it was shared, but it was also isolated. That the idea that each woman was in a cell, per se had this boundary around what they're doing. I think once people start to put things in the middle, then you kind of, because you need to be ready to go into people's cells, and then you need to be ready to communicate with what people are doing. So there's so many layers in there, and then you need to go back to your space and see where you are at, and so I kind of just I don't know, there's a sense of tasting, from what people were doing, but not like a lot of in-depth time with artists, because I wasn't there enough to kind of be able to be with artists and then go back to my space. So it was like it held something, but it wasn't led by the collaboration, if you know what I mean. It was quite subtle as it happened. And then there was the odd thing that I did feel at times. I was the only dancer. I was the only one in a non-cell. I was the only one working with technology. So I felt a little bit like, ooh, a bit fish out of water at points. But that was more like a mental thing, because once you're there in the work, it doesn't matter. But so it was very new for me to work with other artists in this way.
Yeah, it's really lovely to see that you did want to try new things and develop new ways of working in a very unusual space, especially for a dancer. Is that something, unusual spaces, is that something you would like to look more into in the future?
Yeah, I think any space can be unusual, even if it's quite casual, isn't it? If you change something, it might turn into something unusual. But I think historical spaces that have a legacy of some sort of pain, or whatever it is that's there, they are fascinating, and I'm open to work on things in that way. There's something I want to say that it just escaped me, but something about anyway, it will come back.
So what's next for you then? I know you've got a very busy schedule, but what's on the lineup for you?
I've been working on a 3-screen film that is related to hands and hand gestures, but mainly it's hands that push away and hands that welcome. It's the reflection that I've been having for a few years. I started filming it. I started filming maybe 3 years ago, and then I invited another artist, Chris Lewis-Smith, another filmmaker, to collaborate. So we created the Hands project, and so Chris has been filming artists, potters, visual artists doing their work. So it's the hands of them in action, the creative hands. And I've been working with this idea of hands of agency, but also the impact of our actions. In inviting and pushing away, and that can be interpreted now with COVID. There's a myriad of possibilities. But it was more to do with refugees when I started the project. The simplicity of gestures that are in one spiral, and the massive effects that they have, whatever you decide to do. So that is opening in Bath on the 26th of October. Which month am I? And it stays for 10 days and is at the Lockbrook campus, inside in a gallery inside the Lockbrook campus, which belongs to Bath University. And then also I've been working with a computer scientist called Sven Galden, and we've been developing a device called Sonic Dancer, which is a way of experiencing presence through sound. And so it's a device that picks up sound and transfers to another place. And so we've been working with dancers and creating scores where we would be doing kind of remote experiences of movement. And I have a showcase to end the R&D phase at Pavilion Dance Southwest in Bournemouth on the 13th of November.
Very busy.
Very busy.
I hope they go really, really well, and we're looking forward to seeing what new things you do in the not too far future. So I just want to wrap up and just say thank you so much for your time. This has been really great to get a little overview of your work, and we'll hopefully speak to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me and to shaking my practice, because that's what happened. It shook my practice, and now I have to kind of taking new ways of working. So I'm really thrilled that happened. So thank you for the opportunity. It was brilliant.
You're more than welcome.